Welcome to Children of Dionysus. Today's guest is Kevin Stanfa. Kevin, what's going on, brother?
Hey, good. Living the life, living that dream, whatever that dream is.
Yeah, the dream, right? Awesome. Well, Kevin, how's your day going so far, man?
So far it's been good. Survival job, antics, easy, flexible, excited for the weekend.
Nice. What's your survival job?
I worked for Equinox. It was really this great thing that I could come back to in and around school sometimes. I originally, after college, I came to New York City with a dream and a suitcase, two suitcases, and was like, I need a job. And then I had worked in college at like a fitness center on campus. And so I was like, oh, this is what I'm qualified for. I walked into an Equinox and pretty soon after got a job at a front desk. I also worked in retail at American Eagle. That was sad and depressing. But then I got into grad school and then I left New York. And then after 3 years of grad school, degree in hand, moved back to New York and was like, I still need rent. So I'm not going to be on Broadway immediately, or who knows what I'm going to be doing. I had some very realistic expectations for the city, having lived in it for almost a year before. And so I was like, need a job. I got one even quicker than the first time I was here. And then went right back to Equinox, which was both helpful and yet also like very demoralizing on some level because all of a sudden it felt like I was exactly almost literally where I was at the 3 years before. But fortunately has proven very helpful for my life in theater and trying to do other things in the arts and entertainment industry. Has always sort of been this great flexible thing because there's so many people who work in those industries who work at Equinox. And so as I moved up and continue to work for Equinox, it's just got more flexible and supports me in all my endeavors sort of outside of Equinox in a really lovely way. And still, they understand that I am an artist and an actor, a teacher, all those things, in addition to everything I do for them. So I get my rent, my health insurance, and I don't have to depend on those things outside of my job, which is nice, like on the entertainment side. Um, but yeah.
And what are you doing for Equinox now? I mean, you started at the front desk, but what's your position now?
Uh, what I would say on dates is that if Equinox is a video game, I'm like the strategy guide walkthrough that club teams will go to try to understand how they get through a level. We don't do cheat codes. If you want to be like a game genie, there's a deep dive reference for you. But I definitely am like a walkthrough. Policy, procedure, processes. A coworker also calls me like the genius bar of Equinox. So when people have problems, not members, but like the staff, it's all internal for everything I do. They come to me to kind of like help fix it. And so I manage a small team. I have very various ad hoc things I work on. Not really interesting or pertinent or really more boring, if anything. But it's something I can sort of do from anywhere if I need, which is really helpful. For example, I remember doing tech in a show that had me out of the theater. Unfortunately, it was like in the city itself, but I was like, for 4 or 5 days, I was doing tech and dress out in, Queens somewhere. And I was like, well, I have to be there, but I don't really want to take the time off, but I'm going to have so much dead time. And so I was like, well, I just have to have my laptop and that's all I need to do my job. And so that is one thing that I'm really like, I think is benefited actors, if anything, in this like pandemic, post-pandemic world is like remote work is a really useful tool for us to still be able to earn money, especially if we're not working as consistently as much of our profession do.
And what was it always remote?
No. Well, originally when I started, everything was very hard-coded software on a local computer. And then as our business sort of continued to grow and technology is what it was, we sort of started embracing more cloud-based things. And then all our software became much more cloud-based, so you could access it from anywhere. So as long as you had, VPN and dual factor authentication, two-factor authentication, you could essentially do it anywhere as long as you had internet connection, which is useful.
So if you don't mind me asking, how many years now have you worked with Equinox?
Uh, since coming back, 15 years.
Wow.
I
Um,
mean, ugh.
and and for the I mean that's important, right? Because like as we know, this job this career that we've chosen is can be very sort of chaotic and unpredictable, and the money's not always coming in. So for you to be able to sustain yourself at a job for 15 years, even though it might not seem that exciting, I think it's important because at least that stuff is taken care of, which is what you mentioned a little earlier.
I mean, it was for that, year and a half where everything was shut down in like March 2019, and like so much of our industry in entertainment just was like, at least theater especially in New York, like theaters didn't reopen for like 9 months, and then theaters around the country weren't really, they had put their seasons on hiatus or decided to defer and then not do anything to the following year. Like all the indie companies that I was working with prior to the pandemic took a much, much longer to sort of reel back from that. And so like if I had to depend on the entertainment industry or theater in general for money, I would have been, screwed. So like it was great to know that I was very privileged and had the opportunity to stay with a job that furloughed many people in my company, but I was at such a position and had a certain knowledge base that meant I was one of like the 15% that they kept during the time when they furloughed or minimized the salary of others. And so I'm very thankful for that and recognize the privilege of that, especially for like from March until like September 2019 when this entire city was shut down. So I very much appreciated that. And yeah.
And it sounds to me like it's a little like there's some type A like stuff that has to happen, right? Like, do you have to be like really type A to do that kind of job?
Uh, I think there's aspects of type A that help,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd say there's also like I also we do this like personality assessment. We're not Myers-Briggs, but there's like a personality assessment that our company like goes through both for like employees and like prospective members, for example, that helps you identify what personality type they might be and then like how to best sell them or work with them. And so like my personality type at my company is like C type, which is very much like work oriented, very particular, very detailed. So like because my role is very administrative on so many levels, but I in my capacity also direct work. There is the detail oriented nature of what I do, but then and wanting to get things right. So there can be very dogmatic, these are the rules and the policy, which is sort of like the benefit of my mind, I guess, that works for it. And to have an A personality and be like, this is what it is, and I'm not going to back down and go after that. Like, I think that's helpful in that regard. If what I think of when I think of a personality, anyway, when you say a personality or type
Um,
A.
yeah, I mean, sort of like the executive kind of crossing T's, dotting I's, the operator that makes sure things get done. That's
Yeah,
what I mean
like
by
it.
that.
Yeah, sure. Like, and then, to me, that also feels very corporate-y. And I'm like, yeah, I am very corporate-y in that sense. But like, I like to think that there's certain things that I'm much more laid back about. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
micromanagey at all. I like to think that I can trust the people I've hired to do the job that they do, and I like have ways of keeping track of that. So like I will hopefully catch things if it's that. So like I'm not so corporate that I'm trying to hold on to a certain amount of control. So I like to say that I trust in the people under me, and they've sort of proven themselves because there's so many people under me that have been here for like over a year or even longer. We have a department, I think, that has a very certain particular type of personality that there are many people in my department that have been here for 5+ years, which is great.
And how does that how do you kind of square that with the impulse of an artist of I just want to dance, right? Like does that ever come out in your job or you kind of just have to
Uh,
cordon that on in your brain for a while?
yeah, so like okay, so this is my hot take. Some people probably like we have masks, right? So I don't like who I am in the office versus and who I am in the theater space. Maybe there's like the volume goes up a little down here and there, but like vocally speaking is my best example is like we're work on a very quiet floor. And if I'm on a phone call, I'm not like, hey, Laris, yeah, I need those action items. I'm not whispering and trying to keep my voice down a certain way. I have a voice, it's supported, and I'm making sure it's being heard. And unfortunately, I work in what I call a library. And so I'm like, yeah, people can hear my voice. Like, they just got to deal with it. Like, will I be sensitive and trying to like go to a room somewhere like I am now? Yes. But like, so I think being myself in every aspect, both in corporate and artist. Like it actually helps me at my job in some ways. Um, maybe I'm not going to have like the same emotional availability at my job like that I might as out in the world or in like a acting class or acting workshop where I'm teaching or working. But uh, I think it informs and helps uh, the creative side of me, right?
Mm.
Now, there's the creative side of me also like crying a lot. Yeah. Like there's a part of me that's like, oh, these Excel spreadsheets, why can't I be memorizing a script? Yeah, absolutely. Like, sometimes I used to say like when my job is like a means to an end. Like as long as it's supporting the things outside of it, it's great. It means a lot. It feels like I don't care what I'm doing. And then I go to a rehearsal or go teach a class or go run a workshop and I'm like, cool, cool, cool. I don't feel bad about what I'm doing during the day because it's helped supports this thing at night or on the weekends or other days. And I used to feel a bit more bad, like if I didn't have anything, I was like, you're wasting your time. It's not supporting
Mm.
anything. And I've been able to really, I think, shift my perspective in like, it's a much larger scope. It's like, it's there for when I don't have anything, and that's a privilege, but it's also there to like make me feel better about when I'm doing those things that I'm not getting paid decently well with and then makes me feel even better about it. So yeah, there's like my job doesn't always doesn't come up with the creativity. Sometimes I have to find the creativity. And if the creativity isn't there, then I think what I try to respect is not the lack of creativity, but like, oh, okay, so I'm a very routine oriented person, and sometimes um, I appreciate the cyclical nature of a lot of things in my job. So I'm like, oh, here's the things that actually I can really rely on in my job, and that's sort of satisfying and gives me less anxiety. And so those are the things that I choose to like savor about my job. And I sort of like give into that, and it can be very zen. And I think actually working out is the best way to mitigate a lot of those things and feelings and hormone levels that I might deal with or not doing what I want to be doing all the time. Um, so I think I had really good, I don't want to say coping mechanisms, but I think I have built over years a good perspective on several things, if that makes sense.
It does. And for those of you who can't see, Kevin is in extraordinary shape. It's the
Not
man is
about that.
shredded. So it's one of the things aside from your talent and you're just very knowledgeable. I like listening to you speak about the work is so refreshing. It's kind of like ice cold water on a warm day. And so I always respected that about you, and the fact that you were always in phenomenal shape and you always try to look as good as you can. I think that that's important because to me, I always said, I was like, well, this guy takes pride in who he is. He takes the time to take care of himself. And I am a proponent, the older I get, I think, of beauty for its own sake in all of its forms. You know what I mean? Like, I think that beholding that in all of it, whether it's somebody who's in good shape, whether it's somebody who sings well, whether it's somebody who dresses well, it's like, oh, I, as somebody observing that, it makes my day better.
Mm.
So I always respected that and appreciated that about you. And I totally agree. I work out as well. And it's just like, Jesus, if I didn't work out, I don't know, man. It'd be really rough. Um, so talk to me about your where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born outside Chicago and back in the day, and I grew up there for about 10 years, and then my mother's job moved us to Utah of all places.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't grow up with any religion, so I didn't go to Utah and become Mormon, for example. That's usually the second question when people hear from. I usually say I am from Utah because my formative years were spent there, I believe. And I spent the next 13 years there through essentially the rest of elementary, middle school, high school, college. Um, yeah. And then left in when I was like in my early 20s to go to New York the first time. Um, yeah. Does that answer?
Yeah, yeah, it does. So walk me through what it was like growing up in Utah. I hear it's beautiful out there. I've never actually been, but
It was the first time in my life that I'd really been to a completely different place for a long period of time. Like I think up to the age of 10, you grow up in your family home, the home you were like raised in from like a child onwards. And my understanding of the world was very limited to just like, Northern Illinois, some of Wisconsin, and one random trip to Florida. Uh, but growing up in Utah and feeling like othered by being from another part of the country, um, and especially being very aware of the prevalent faith of or religion of the area, which is something that I was never very aware of in Illinois. And there might be other places in the country that sort of like where there's a prevalent religion that is sort of worn on people's sleeve a bit more. But like, at least in Utah, my initial experiences where I remember when I was like, 10 and in the area, I was like really understanding how much faith and religion were part of these people's daily lives and like how much it entered into conversation. It wasn't just this like private personal thing that they only talked about with their family and on the weekends on Sunday. It was something that was like in the culture, which is hard when you grow up with it, when it's so part of the culture, which means it sort of blurs the lines between, the best way to say it is blurs the lines between church and state, right? So we're built on this country, this idea that there's a separation, but when they have a place in Utah, for example, it feels like so much of the people who are in the state and in political office are of the church, right? Which also guides a lot of their morals and defining principles for things, which also affects them politically. So they make political decisions based on their faith. So then it can feel like the political landscape of the state is often informed a lot about the religion and faith of the state. And so it can feel like a state where those lines blur between church and state a lot. There's obviously some very like defined black and white things like, yes, the church can't do this and the church can't do that. But like, when there are laws on the books that are there because it's a much more right-leaning state, because there's certain things that the LDS faith says you can't do this or can't do that or shouldn't do that, like there's certain belief structures within that, then also that bleeds its way into the sort of political and legal landscape of the state as well. So that can feel hard. And sometimes it felt disproportionate when I was growing up. I think it's a little better now that there's been an influx of people from outside Utah going into Utah, and I think really affecting the political landscape. Now, this state is in no danger of turning purple, but I do think there are definitely much more perspectives being brought into the state by its trying to be like a tech corridor, for example. And I think for the first time in a long time, like it's not just like 90% of the state is one prevalent religion. You're actually getting much more diverse population within the state, which I think can only improve the tapestry of Utah. It's a beautiful place. I'd say in my opinion, the best thing it has going for it is its landscape. The foresty, dry, green North Mountains, the southern Red Rock Desert. It's just sits in this really perfect place in the country, halfway between Nevada and Colorado, and has aspects of both of it. Like there's a certain Goldilocks zone when it comes to the geography, I think, of the state that's really lovely. It's very dry, but like cool. I mean, culturally weird. It's a little quieter, a little slower, but like if you want to live an outdoor life and you want outdoorsy things. I mean, it is an outdoors state, whether it's a skiing in the winter, biking and hiking in the summer. Like Utah has so much of it. And there's so many natural resources as long as they don't do anything to like screw that up. That's like one of the best things like you can have growing up there. I think when I think about some of the best assets that Utah has is sort of natural resources.
And did you find it was a positive or a negative experience for you growing up?
Positive. I mean, I don't have any terribly negative impressions other than like maybe what every child might go through. It's like, oh, growing up's hard. Yeah, kid,
Yeah.
it is. And then you get over it. Like, I don't know. Like, I was a little isolated, I think. It's a I did not grow up in a very diverse state, and then my high school was not very diverse as well. It was a very particular, like middle to upper middle class high school. I feel like, with a very like probably like 92% white, so there's that. My I think my negative impressions were usually like small quibbles. Like there wasn't anything that my life was, I think, worse off for, and was like, get me out of this state. My reasons for like eventually wanting to leave had more to do with I knew if I stayed, there would be a sense of Kevin would want to be complacent and settle and just sort of like do what he's always done here. And I just knew that like, if I wanted to have any life in theater on any level, I was like, I wasn't going to be able to have enough opportunity to be able to like follow that if I had stayed. So there was never like get me out. And obviously I go back and visit numerous times and really enjoy a lot of aspects of it. But yeah, I don't really have any negative impressions on it.
And what brought you, when did you discover that you were like, that you liked acting and you wanted to delve into that?
Uh, High school, I was like the band music instrument backstage crew wielding person for most of middle school when I started to get involved and started to do like anything related to the industry or entertainment, arts, creativity. Because for much of middle school, I was like, I want to be a doctor. I was like, yeah, this makes sense. Like history and I was like good at school. It all made sense to me. Like it was just things clicked. I was like, I guess I'm really good at health things and maybe I could be a doctor. I don't know. I hated biology, so that was always going to probably be a problem. But like I enjoyed medical things. And then at some point I started like taking a drama class and got friends in the drama side. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of cool. And then I was doing stuff backstage crew work and I was like doing dance concerts where I was like doing stuff with the light board. And I was like, this is so fun. So I got to be like the stage crew nerd people.
Mm.
And because I worked my way up through middle school with that, I could like get out of class, so I could go run an assembly, like stuff like that. And then in high school, I started to get a whiff of the actual like theater side of things and getting on stage to do acting. Because I'd like done things here and there, but like I wasn't looking to be on stage in middle school. I can't remember if I was ever on stage as an actor in middle school. Because I had done like a play in elementary school where I was like a Christmas genie. Uh, but like, yeah, no, it wasn't really till high school that that bug kind of really started to like get in there. And I was like, oh, maybe around, I had like weird FOMO about the theater people. I was like, hey, I want to be part of that. I want to be in the drama club. What's that? What's that? That's cool. I mean, like, I wanted to be their friends and they seemed cool and interesting. And I wanted to be part of drama club and the drama teacher seemed so cool. And like, I was like hanging on his every word and his validation meant everything to me. And I was like, oh, it's just so stupid. But that was me in high school. And then by the end of my senior year, I had every fine arts teacher in my schedule, and I was like barely doing anything science related. It was like I had English, social dance, bands, theater, and I was randomly in the a cappella choir. Like I was fine arts by the end of it. And then through all of that, was like, I guess maybe I'll go to college for that. And so very riskily, I only applied to two colleges. One was a college, and I was like, I guess I should have a backup. And I was like, history. And then I applied to this other school as like their conservatory acting program. And I was like, thank God I got this conservatory acting program at my in my in-state school, which is great. Because like, God forbid I didn't. And then I was like, what else am I gonna do? So
So are you the only actor in your family?
yes. The rest of my family was much more bookish, and the creativity there was a bit more visual arts. Maybe like my sister was a very photography driven person when she was growing up, but no one else had the sort of like, I want to be on stage.
And how did they respond when you made the decision to pursue it?
Uh, Indifferent. I don't know. There was no like, oh that's so cool. And they weren't like, this is a hard life. You shouldn't do it. Like, whether for better or for worse, like that, I had a very supportive, positive, but very indifferent. Like I never had like stage family or a stage mother. They were like, "That's what you want to do? Cool." They would come see things if I was in them. If I was like, "Don't come to this," they'd be like, "Okay." So they were neither no one ever tried to dissuade me from following a career in the arts or a path that included the arts. I think they were just like, cool, that's what you want to do. That makes you happy. Great, figure that out, and then we'll see how we can support you best in that. And I don't think there was ever a conversation where I was like, "Mom, I want to be an actor," and she was like, "Well, I don't know, Kevin." I just was like, "I'm going to apply for this thing," and it was like, "Cool, great." And then once I was like, "I got a scholarship," my mom was like, "Even better." So like, I think as long as it wasn't anything too crazy, I think she was like, "Great, awesome, you do you."
And remind me, where was the school again?
Undergrad was the University of Utah.
Okay, the Utes. Were,
Correct.
were you a sports fan at all?
Not until I got to college and not since.
Because
Like
there were.
growing up outside of Chicago, we were Bulls fans, and so that was a hard thing to like be in Utah in the 90s and be a Bulls fan. And then I went to college,
Right.
and then I had sort of abandoned any professional sports and being any sports watcher. And then I started sort of because I was very involved in my undergrad experience. I just was there all the time. Even though I was fine arts, I started doing a lot of other things at the U, and eventually was like, oh, football, that's kind of cool. I could have cared less about basketball at my undergrad, but like for some reason started getting into the football. And then my mom did. And then like it kind of like we would watch games together. And I was like, I've never had this experience before. Is this what it's like to like watch football with your family? Cool. All right, great, awesome, awesome. And so that was like a really fun thing. And I just have very strong, nostalgic, amazing memories of like either being at home or being somewhere on campus and watching a game. I was never going to go to a game. I think I probably did once or twice, but I was much more excited in watching it and also watching it at home and watching it with my family. And like I was fortunate that I went to the U at a time when there was really good teams each of the years that I was there. So when I left, if they had any sort of like downhill slope while they sort of transitioned, converted, rebuilt after people leave, like I wasn't aware of it because as soon as I left the school, I was like, University of what? I game college football. And you think, oh, maybe that could have carried over when I went to Florida State because Florida State and Seminoles and like huge, huge football program, right? Could have cared less.
Yeah, you were there when the Utah Jazz were like good, but then they just kept getting beat by the Bulls.
Yeah, it was really hard. And we were sort of not shy about being Bulls fans, which was a little like it was mostly fine. Like, we definitely had a year where we like put stuff up at the window that was like Bulls fans live here, which is kind of putting a target on your house in what is a predominantly Utah Jazz place. And, when was the last time they had a berth in any playoffs or the finals? And so all of a sudden they're having this run and then they're in it. And we're like, we're Bulls fans. We're gonna not shy away from being Bulls fans. And but it was mostly okay. I think we pissed off some newspaper delivery boy by having that stuff up once, but that was about it.
So you ended up going to Florida State for, it sounds like, graduate school, right?
Correct.
Why did you choose Florida State of all places to go?
Uh, choose is a funny word. I asterisk C footnote, like this is entirely flukish, right? So like at most people, like there's this like weird industrial thing even within the school system of like people getting through undergrad and going, I have to go into grad school, I have to jump into grad school. And I
Mm-hmm.
was the only one I feel like maybe that was because I was surrounded by people that have kept having those grad school conversations. And I was doing an internship and I was like, I have no idea why I would go to grad school, and I don't really want to right now. Like maybe down the line I will. Cool, that's awesome, great. And so I didn't have any of those worries or concerns about the next phase of education when I was getting out of undergrad. So I just was like, life and maybe moving to New York. That's going to be my secondary education here after college. Make the move to New York, and I've given myself a lot of leeway. And I'm like, hey, like you're not going to go into a room and audition at Rip Career and get a Broadway gig and six. Like I was like, just learn the city. You've never been in a city like this before because I'd really never even visited New York. In that time, I eventually started working with some people at Columbia, which was really lovely, and then started doing some acting while I was here on top of everything else. And finally was like identifying some things that I was like, I was starting to figure some stuff out in my senior year And I think I'd like to continue what some of that was, both personally and creatively. But I was like, I was very, I felt like developmentally in my life as an artist and an actor was sort of delayed, deferred, because there were things I was figuring out in the first couple of years on top of everything else in life that you figure out. And so I thought by my senior year, I was starting to find confidence and ownership in a process. And I was like, oh, that stopped. Great. Okay. Well, so then I discovered some of that by working through on some projects I was doing here in New York. And I started to go, you know, if I were to go to grad school, this is why I would go to grad school. It's like, here's this process I started, and this was what the things that I was really liking, and here's where I would sort of like hone in on and be like, that's the thing, that this level of imagination, engaging with my imagination and working from that impulsivity. I was like, that's what I need to do. Like, I've kind of figured out some of the voice stuff. I don't actually worry about that. I'm like, give me some of this like opportunity to engage with my imagination and feel confident in that technique. Um, and fortunately, while I was having those sort of thoughts, feelings, ideas, um, I was having a conversation with some friends from college that I moved to New York with, and we were having a conversation in Central Park. And they're like, "Oh yeah, there's this program that this director had worked at the year before, who we had worked with in grad school or undergrad rather for a moment." And he had talked about it, and I hadn't really, I didn't have a lot of memory of him talking about this program, but they sort of reminded me of it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds interesting." And on top of the fact that they were having that conversation about this grad program, which was at FSU, the Oslo Conservatory, I was in the midst of doing this rehearsal process for the show and having those thoughts of if I were to go to grad school, this would be why. And then so then having that, oh, someone's talking about grad school. I've been thinking about these thoughts of why I might go to grad school. What the hell? Let's reach out. Um, and so I had reached out and was like, can I get more information? And that's almost all I said. I was like, hey, I know you're still looking for people, but I have a friend of mine or a director had recommended this place as something for me to look into at some point in life. Can you give me any more information? Um, and then it sort of like snowballed, and then I got into grad school as a result of that one email. So I chose FSU because of the snowball series of dominoes that fell in my place, and I kept saying yes, yes. I don't know, but yes. So that was I. You might almost say that it chose me.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't that I was like, oh, I want to go to Yale or Juilliard or UCSD. Like, oh, these are all names of schools that I gladly would have been like, I want to put on a menu and go audition for these things, and just sort of fell into this fluke circumstance where I was like, you know what? Like this was I'm not one to talk about fate or destiny necessarily speaking, but I was like, there are a series of things that happen and you can just say yes to, right? And I think that's even like a Uta Hagen thing, right? You can just say yes, even though you don't have all the information, but you feel good about the idea or you have an instinct for it. And so I was like, I'm going to say yes. Worst case, I can figure it out and I don't like it, I can go. So I was like, you know what? I can just move ahead and say yes. There's this program that has enticing me. I went down there. I audited a class. I was prepared to be like, if it doesn't feel like I can fit and see myself there, because it's always been important in theater. One of my like guiding principles is like, if I can see myself doing it, then I can do it. So growing up watching theater shows or plays, I was like, I can see myself on stage. So I was like, well, okay, so I can do that. Like, because I can visualize it for whatever reason, I was like, great. I could never look at a movie and see myself in a movie. So then I've never really been like, while I think I can do it, I have no desire. I'm not like trying to get a movie career or trying to get a TV career. Like I'm not driven toward that. I was like theater. It excites me, entices me. I see myself on stage. So then that was that was a really positive impact. So when I audited the class and I was like, can I see myself here with these people doing this thing with this professor? And then after that class, I was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, and I think he's working on the thing that I think I have addressed in my own process that I think I want to work on, and I think he will. Cool. Go for it. Take that leap.
Did you find yourself, did you feel like you developed those parts of yourself that you maybe felt like weren't yet developed or that were deferred when you were down there?
Uh, yes, I think I was really able to start that work. I will say that all the work that you do in college and grad school is doesn't end when you get a degree. In some ways, you learn principles and foundations that may not actually click for you until years later. And I think that's a really hard concept because then what happens is you learn these things, you don't immediately feel like you've adopted them, and then you sort of revert to habits because in stressful situations, we revert to things we know, right? So that can be very alluring unless you continue to sort of work on it, I think. And then there's also like, you might not figure that thing out that you learned in year two of grad school until 5 years later because all of a sudden you're in a circumstance where you're like, aha, and now you get to recognize, and then you get to go, oh, and then maybe that's when you finally get to shed some of those habits. So, um, yes, I think I had a really great opportunity. I think I was still also distracted by the, you know, detractors of a education system that is very pass fail, which I do not think always is helpful to an actor or an artist in what we do. So much of what we do is very personal. And because I think so much of what we do, we might learn of an idea or a concept, but like if we don't have a way of grasping that concept immediately, it doesn't mean you won't. Like, but if you're being judged in a semester on a grade about how well you achieve that, like that might be a hard measure because I think we're all built and understand things very differently. So you're sort of asking 10 to 15 people to get a passing grade to understand their a certain concept or how well they embrace that. And so like, but how honestly are they embracing it versus going through emotion of like kind of understanding it? So, but yeah, I made really good use of my time. Learned some things, started doing other things I had never done before, which was like I had like a moment in my third year where I was directing. But what I wasn't able to like quite shed was some of the imposter syndrome stuff. I think we all deal with until we're like 102 but also the confidence, myself in relation to my fellow actors and this like you think you'd almost be able to drop some of the competitive feeling, right? That like you have because you got into the school, so you beat out people, right? But like you're sort of in this class of other people or this school of two other classes above you, and you kind of feel like there's a level of you that's like still jockeying for attention or to be noticed or and to be validated and I think those aspects of what we perhaps sometimes do in our profession, those mind games are not helped by certain parts of grad school. Um, so yeah, but I had a good time, you know, and learned a lot about myself.
What did you learn about yourself?
Um, well, I think I learned I relied too much on others to sort of like tell me I was doing the right thing in life or in theater. Um, I gave an enormous amount, I would give an enormous amount of power over to an authority figure like
Mm.
a director or a teacher. And I think I would then be very emotionally affected and frustrated if I wasn't pleasing them or if I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do. And then I would have a very strong reaction to like not doing a thing right, and I think that's the other thing at school gets you in this weird mode of is right and wrong. And I don't think that sort of like binary thinking is helpful to what we do as artists all of the time. If we're thinking in terms of right and wrong, doing it right versus not doing it wrong, um, as opposed to what works and maybe what doesn't work as well. Or, for example, what else did I learn about myself? Learned how I could love or be loved, perhaps. That was something I hadn't anticipated, like personally, like amongst friends or trying to date, which was not very successful in grad school, and nor do I necessarily recommend, but there are people who met because of grad school and got married and got kids. Like it's amazing. There's exceptions to this rule. Did not affect me, but there definitely a lot can be had. And like there was a great opportunity in being able to concentrate solely like 5, 6 days a week on nothing but theater from like morning till night into the wee hours, like between even from the having to support a show as like a crew to get some crew hours, versus then finally getting to be on stage and but also having time to work on your own things here and there, all of that opportunity of 3 years of nothing but theater was very, very important and was a gift that like who's ever going to get that again? Because even in college, I had to have a job to pay for the car and the cell phone. Like I was doing a lot and I don't know how I ever slept, but on top of everything else, doing gen eds and having a job and working for the school newspaper and doing other extracurricular activities within the department. Like I was spread in many different directions, but in grad school, it was like hyper focused on the work, the craft, yourself and as an individual and how that all sort of like was intertwined. And I think learning that it was all intertwined, if that makes sense, like how much the personal affects the creative. And there's maybe sometimes a temptation, at least I've seen maybe people that like to compartmentalize, and I don't necessarily think myself as an artist, it helps to compartmentalize the aspects of my personality and my heart and my life outside of the stage affects me just as much on stage. And so, um, like I can acknowledge things that happen outside that door and say, there's that. But I don't check out from it. It's just sort of part of who I am. It's part of my story. It's part of my humanity, which informs my characters, like on some level. It's part of my given circumstances. I can't just like leave at the door and I'm like a tabula rasa. Like I don't subscribe to being a blank slate for, Hamlet. Like that's not possible. He's not. So, I don't know if that helps answer that question.
No, it does. Was there a singular thing? Because I think that that's something that a lot of actors, some actors get into this because they never had validation and they think that the applause or the attention is going to somehow fill that void, which it never does, I don't think. But was there a singular thing or was there a singular process that helped you to overcome that need of validation and need that sort of authority figure to help you out? Or to
Um,
validate you, excuse me?
sure. There's two ways for me. So, like the not seeking sort of validation from an authority figure. I think eventually I was like, look, that you're never going to be able to. I don't know. I think I was like, you're never going to be able to please everyone, or this is emotionally hard for you to sort of like always be trying to please a director or a teacher. And I don't think I was able to shed that notion until after grad school, as I
Mm,
sort of moved farther and farther away from it, because you're in it, like would it have been helpful to me to really like start to abandon that idea while in grad school and like find release in that? Yeah, that would have been great in a perfect world. But like there's certain things in my life I'm not ready for until I am. So I think as I got further away from grad school and realized I also couldn't depend on an authority figure or a teacher figure to sort of like validate me for that. It sort of had to come from somewhere else, right? So it can only come from me and my experiences. The sort of not needing or wanting validation or trying to please others and aspect of I think the work that the only thing I have control over is me and I can't seek to control others and others' perceptions of me honestly did not really click into place until my late 30s, and I honestly think it was very large life changes that happened. And
mm,
I sort of abandoned that with other things and found all of a sudden this sort of secondary result, which was like I started, it sounds, when I say I started not caring, it was like I wasn't prioritizing it anymore. I was like, it mattered less what someone thought of me. So I still cared about people and I was still sensitive to things, but I was sort of had taken away the power that I had given away to others to say whether they liked me or not, whether they liked my choices or not, because at the end of the day, I needed to like those things about myself or I needed
mhm,
to like how I was doing a process. Like to help me get away from, am I doing it correct, Laris? Is that good? Does that, like we lose on some level or we stop trusting our own point of view on our work and our imagination, and we look for someone to validate our imaginative choices. And I think that's a really fucking hard thing to do because
Mm,
then it's actually not about you, it's about just somebody like your imagination and your choices. And I'm like, oh, and finding one's faith in that can be freeing because
mm,
then you start to view your choices as an actor and as an artist and a teacher and as a person less in the lens of, oh, is this going to make someone angry? Is this going to make someone happy? Is this someone going to make someone laugh? And I'm like, I release control of outcome and just want to go, do I like what I'm doing in this moment? And trying to reinforce those outcomes that have a positive success rate so that if I in making my choices and it secondarily has an effect where someone's like, oh, it did this for me, and someone's like, oh, but it did this for me, and I can go, oh, well, I know what I was doing in my process that sort of made that successful, so lean on this thing more and maybe less away from that because that might be the old way of thinking and that's leading to that. Or, oh, that choice is, I can recognize what's a very subjective point of view on a choice I made and go, great, I'm not going to make Laris happy, but I might make Tyler happy, like, which is why I can't depend on trying to make anyone happy because points of view are very subjective. So because I can't make any one person happier than the other or different and please everyone, I can only start here and then be like, well, maybe what I do as an artist can make a lot of people happy or not, but like I think if I go from I sort of found I needed another not litmus test, but another a barometer for success or a barometer for a work that made me happy
mm.
or made me feel like as an artist I worked. That doesn't mean I'm like 100% happy all the time. And sometimes I'm like, oh, but like even when it's hard, I still think at the end of the day I'm working. Or when I'm frustrated, I know how to like kind of get through some of that.
And how has that change in perspective affected the way your relationship with how you actually pursue the career now and live as an actor?
Um, how has it changed? I think because I don't compartmentalize like my personality and also don't try to control perception, whether I'm with a friend or in work or in theater or teaching a class, um, it's overall made the quality of life that I have a little better in that sense. And like it's sort of released a burden of anxiety about that. Um, my sort of with relation to the business, I think it helped me sort of accept this idea that like, look, 80% of our workforce is not working consistently at any one time. Like, so I think it's helped me accept what is right now, which is like, there's going to be some hybrid version of theater in my life, whether it's, will it ever be 100% theater all the time? Probably not, because it isn't for 90, 80% of our profession. Accepting that there was an outcome where I was going to have to always have some sort of job that made sure I had rent and health insurance, that kind of security that we're all after to some degree, and realized, oh, that releases me to still be able to continue to follow these things in other ways. And so I think that acceptance, that sort of like seeing things as they are, and trying not to guilt myself with the word should.
Mm,
Oh, I should be doing more for myself as an actor, or I should be taking a class, or I should be doing auditions more. Like I sort of released myself from this expectation that I think we hold ourselves to, thinking this is what we should do,
mm,
and was like, as opposed to what I think I should be doing, just what do I want to be doing? What am I doing? Because on some level, I realized I can't guilt myself too much to do something because I don't think the outcomes are ever very positive. Because then maybe I almost resent the choice.
okay.
So if I can't guilt myself into it because I know I'll resent myself or the profession for doing it, I need another barometer, another motivator, right? So then it becomes like,
Mm,
okay, why do I want to do the thing? Why do I want? What do I want? And asking oneself what you really want in any given moment. And I'm not just talking about I want to be on Broadway or I want a life where 80% of my stuff comes from theater and 20% is like maybe a serving gig. Like I don't mean like those feel like softer, headier vision board wants. Like I think it's more the day-to-day wants of like, I don't know, do I want to pay for lunch right now? And like, do I want to be able to afford that and not starve? I don't, it's what do I want my day to day, week to week, month to month life to look like? And then what room is there in that for the things I also want to do? And so do I want to go out for that audition? No. Do I want to go out for that audition? Sure. Like, do I start to get more particular and curate how theater is involved in my life? Yes. Do I have I basically excised anything that I didn't want to do and felt like I should or felt obligated to do? Yes, because when I was doing those things, I felt terrible for having done it. So I was like, well, what if I just don't do the things I don't want to do? And then my life, even as a theater actor, became so much better because I stopped
Mm.
doing the things I didn't want to do, thinking I should do them. So that's kind of how it's helped me manage sort of the ratio and sort of what I'm doing or how much I'm doing sometimes, Um, I think I accept things as they are in any given moment and try not to worry as much as I can about the future. And look, I'm terrified sometimes of the unknown in the future. Like I get that. That's very vulnerable for me, like not knowing a thing. But
Right.
I also accept that I have very little control over something that hasn't happened. And so I try really not to worry about something that hasn't happened and try to, I can only worry about something in the moment as it's happening.
You mentioned quality of life. What did you mean by that?
Just like, I mean, quality of life. Like, New York's a hard city. Um, I don't want to just be eating ramen all the time.
Mhm.
Like, that's a want. Okay, well, if I don't want to be eating ramen all the time and I want to be able to go see a movie or go see a play, that has certain things. Like, and those were important to me to be able to like go out to dinner with friends because friends are important, like it's not a sacrifice. It's, oh, what I want is I want to be able to go out with friends and have dinners. I want to be able to go see a play. I need to be able to afford those things. Well, I that means having a job that's consistent, which is what I've sort of curated for myself, that has also given me a certain privilege and opportunity to still be able to be flexible and do things like my flexibility and opportunity to be able to go do auditions in person or not, or do go into an office and spend 15 minutes doing a voiceover audition, like, or submission. Like I can do all those things. And that all came from what I want and sort of answering that. And I don't do auditions I don't want to do just because they necessarily come into my inbox and like, we submitted you for this. And I'll be like, but I don't want to do that. So I don't do it.
And how do you, I mean, it seems like a very healthy outlook on a career, right? And it sounds to me like it took you a little while to get there. Um, the journey sounds from someone who sounded like they needed validation, which is very, very common. How do you keep yourself in that healthy space with the demands of the city and the career and the life?
Um, it's all percentages. Like, I don't think there's like an on-off switch for it.
Mhm.
Like, I'm on 29 days and all of a sudden there's a day where it's off and I'm just like destitute. And maybe that is for some people. For me, I feel like how I've learned to describe how my psyche works is everything is in percentages and shifts and ebbs and flows. And like, there are weeks that feel really freaking amazing in terms of how I'm vibing, in terms of how art and acting and teaching fits into my life. And there's other times where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling very less creative and like, oh, this is so sad. Why aren't you doing more? And I think the act of recognizing the feelings as they happen and this sort of like that's ebb and flow is going to happen and then just sort of like let that go as opposed to me shoving it away or not acknowledging it because I think sometimes for me if I don't acknowledge it then what might happen is it might build up and then there might be a breaking point where then I just like all those things that I wasn't thinking about overwhelm me and then just become a list and all of a sudden I think that would be a very sad list to go through if I was like saving up those things that I like think about on a given day and don't acknowledge. Um, so I think a healthy dose of acknowledging the thoughts and feelings as they occur, um, and not compartmentalizing things helps me cope uh, in general for things when they don't feel so good. And I think that ritualistic practice, it's a practice, right? So whether it's that you sort of constantly are working on, because it's never going to be, how to say, you're never going to be fixed or like, because I don't think we're
Mm.
broken, but I was like, you're never going to be perfect, right? That's not attainable. Like, and if you were, that would be, you'd probably be unhappy. But like, it's always a constant thing you're working on. And some days I think you're working on it more than others. And some days you release and you don't, you give yourself a break or give yourself some grace. And I think that's the best way forward is sort of giving ourselves grace and understanding that it's a practice. Um, and as long as you practice and you practice good habits, I think those good habits start to sort of like overwhelm any sort of like not bad habits, but habits that might not be helping you. And then they
Mm.
just sort of like, because they're not helping you, you start to shed them. And then you realize those aren't your habits and those aren't what you default to, even in stressful situations, whether personally speaking or artistically.
It sounds to me like the Zen you mentioned at the beginning of the call, which is we can sort of laugh at it, but it reminds me of, I think it's an Asian parable. It's like break rocks, chop wood.
Mm.
The act of just doing the thing is the thing that gives you whatever it is that you're seeking in the first place. And I think about what people call mental health. Mental health used to be called mental hygiene, and which I think is a more appropriate word. But like brushing your teeth, like washing your ass, like it's a constant daily thing to get the stuff to keep it moving, so you stay
Yeah.
fresh and you stay healthy.
Yeah. I think there's, uh, your, like the human hygiene. I think there's also like the artist hygiene. Like there's like,
Mm,
the practice that you do and giving yourself the opportunity. So, you know, giving yourself the space in front of other people, I think is important to work on what you do and not making being in a play or getting into a production as precious as it is. Um, because if you're only relying on that, if you don't do it that often, then if that's the only time you sort of give yourself, then like the hygiene for yourself as an actor and the choices and the good habits that you want to make, like you're not giving yourself that opportunity as much, right? Yeah, I think it's good practice for life, good practice for artistry is to sort of keep track of and have good hygiene, which means you don't take care of a problem when it's a problem. You sort of like we brush our teeth so that we don't get cavities. We work out and do cardio so that we don't get heart failure and high cholesterol. We eat a
mm.
certain way, accepting the result of that food, and so, hopefully so that we don't gain weight or don't have excess energy that we're not using and have unhealthy consequences. Like having good hygiene means we are preventively trying to make sure things that are not good for us happen. So like I think that can be true of artistry, that can be true of creativity, like keeping that stuff up. Um, which isn't to say if you didn't do it for a while, like it's okay. It's like kind of like riding a bike, I think. Even if you didn't do it for 5 years, it's still part of you. So, but yeah, I think there's a something to be said for artistic hygiene.
You mentioned that when you were in graduate school, which is actually something that I was told and I found myself experiencing now that I coach actors in Shakespeare, and I'm obviously still an actor, and things that I learned 10, 15, 20 years ago are like coming out of my mouth to my student. I'm like, holy shit, like it was buried back there, from when I was 18. What were a couple of things that you learned that didn't drop in until several years after?
Um, the biggest thing for me, I think the impulsivity and sort of faith in my imagination. And I think that some of the things that my grad school work, especially my first year of acting, was really trying to get us to recognize in terms of making choices, that there's, that making a choice is correct. It,
Mm.
as opposed to missing the train or not getting on, like that there's a time and you just got to make the choice and let that sort of sit back and have the choices happen to you. Like, I think there were like metaphors and ideas, and this was I had a very Russian, amazing, first year acting teacher. And I think I wasn't prepared for some of his philosophy immediately. And like, I started to get it kind of, but it did not really sink in until years later when I sort of resurfaced doing some of the technique very methodically with a small group of people, and then really at some point for whatever reason was like, oh, wait, this is making sense now. Oh, okay, now I'm going to give into that side of me. Oh, that's what he was talking about. Oh my God. Okay, great, cool. Like, and it's amazing is how much of my first year acting teacher comes out of me when I am like facilitating or workshopping. And some people might think that I'm being far too because if someone's working and I'm working with them as a teacher or a coach, I'm not just being quiet. You know, there's a party that's having a very vocal response or like sort of softly being like, that's correct, good, yes, good. Like they're validating the choices in the moment of that you made a choice. Let's go after that. Like if I can sort of like hype you up when you are making choices as an actor. That's like, that means I'm like, great, I'm giving you an immediate reaction to a thing as opposed to, patiently sitting here quietly and giving you sort of an after analysis of like your choices. Like I can sort of in the moment. And I was like, that was very much something he did, for example. And so I am like, oh, I understood the power of that now more so than I ever did in the middle of it. I think in the middle of it, I was like, well, okay, great, okay. But then like having that reinforcement, both as the actor, but also as a teacher, having it done to me and doing it, I was like, oh, I get this. And then it's just like the second nature, and I own it, and I don't care what anyone thinks or feels about it. Like this is my method. This is my like teacher freak flag that wants to work this way. And I think I see the results of it in people that I might be working with. Some people maybe respond to it, some people don't. I don't know. Like, so that I'd say that sort of like reinforcement of making a choice, regardless of people wanting, because we want to judge choices as we do them, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think we're acting and we're kind of like when we get in our heads, maybe we're like, oh, I decided I wanted to do that thing, and I was like, or I had this idea, but I was like, no, that might come across this way, and sort of that like censoring, prejudging of a choice that comes to you. And I think one of the things that my grad was trying to sort of like get rid of this idea that you should like censor your impulsivity, like you have an impulse and you should try to follow it, like green light it is one of the metaphors or phrases that they would use, is like green light that choice and then see where it goes and then sort of see how you feel afterwards. And did you like that result? No? Great. Okay. You got in the practice and the habit of green lighting a thing. And so if you can green light the ability in yourself instead of red lighting or yellow lighting your choices and stopping or being too cautious about it, just like, I'm going to green light the choice. I'm going to green light that. And so you get this practice of an impulse coming up and following through on it, impulse coming, following through, following. So then you build up this sort of involuntary response to your acting and your artistry, that you just have impulses and you sort of have this freer channel to sort of follow and lead with that. And then you can sort of sit back as it's involuntarily happening. And about other things that you have to do as an artist, because you're always aware, in my opinion. You're never so into some psychoses that you're like, I am now Hamlet and I don't know who Kevin is. Like your awareness is there, but there are certain parts of you that are so aware that you're like, I have this open channel for impulsivity that is just going to do its thing. So part of what I have to do is just make sure I'm maybe lightly tapping it in certain directions and making it go that way. I'm still driving, but like if a left and a right's going to come up, I'm not going to break the car and sit and think at the fork. I'm going to take the left and then see where that takes me. Right. And I know I just went through like 5 different metaphors, all to do with cars and lights, but like it's the biggest takeaway that has really affected a lot of my acting and teaching, I think, especially in the last like 5 or 10 years, that's really like comes to the top, is like, that's what I didn't have when I was, 26 going through grad school.
And why is it important for an actor to have that open channel, that impulse channel, impulse to action channel?
Because if you are not, if you're in a good practice of not stopping, then you sort of get in this place where you stop judging your choices and just
Mhm.
make choices. If we can sort of systemically go back in your process and the technique and stop you from being much more binary about how you choose. Like we're taught, you need to make a choice. You need to have an objective. You need to make a choice. And then but then some people, okay, they're like, okay, I need to make a choice. But then they start to judge those choices and they start to censor them or filter them. And if we can sort of be in a good practice of that, having a much more free, open channel for it, we can sort of guide the choices that come through. I'm not saying, but as opposed to stopping them, it's always sort of forward, right? There's an energy forward. There's a choice forward. Your own inspiration will come up with things because your own humanity comes up with ideas and choices and movement and like if you don't leave those things behind, they inform you, right? So like if you can have that openness, then you sort of open up, I think, your the level of choices. You open up your imagination to creativity and so many things you're able to do, as opposed to, because can you be successful filtering and censoring and sort of like analyzing and judging a choice? Probably, but I think your scope for what you can do ends up being about this big. So then
Mm.
everything feels very safe and controlled and might feel like good acting or feel like that. But like, I think at the end of the day, that might not be very satisfying for the actor. And I think whether audiences know it or not, it feels safe, right? But I think whether they know that or not, they know when they are getting a full performance, or they know when they are experiencing an actor who has the full faculties of their imagination running. And I think those are the performances that are mine when we're like, oh, that person doing that thing, amazing, stellar. Like Kate Blanchett went away, and all I saw was that character, maybe. I don't know. And I think our perceptions of actors and what we see in film and TV and stage, I think as audience members are very subjective as well. But that's my theory is the controlled performances, I think, are the ones that we don't feel much connection to, or don't have the opportunity to feel as much connection to. Um, but the ones where you have an actor, an artist who sort of is like really embracing that side of themselves and really opening themselves up in that channel to whatever may be. And that's a very scary fucking place to be, because you're sort of going, if I don't put a stop in the way, things are going to come through. And I don't always, and that's vulnerable because you don't know what's going to come through, right? It's sort of because you're letting your imagination drive a little bit, like you're choosing to like let one side of your head have less control. And so you're just like, things are going to come through. So then it becomes about how you can sort of manage those things, not in terms of censoring or filtering exactly or saying no or judging it. But it's like, again, I think it's sort of, it comes back to maybe these things come up and you can sort of like you're driving the car so you can guide the direction instead of stopping it with brakes. And so I think that is where it is very helpful. If that makes sense.
It does make total sense. What is there a performance in your career that you had that sort of scary, oh God thing where you it kind of just took on a life of its own?
Um, I think one of the first things I really started to embrace the sort of scary side of it, at least in recent memory that's coming up, is like I did this production of The Tempest where I was playing Tranquilo. And I would sort of get in these moments before going on stage for the first time of like, just throw it all away. Throw away your expectation, throw away how you think this is going to go, and just you need to be open. See what happens if you're just open to whatever is about to happen on stage. Like, your lines. Don't worry about that. Just like throw it all away. Um, and stepping out each time into this unknown was a very nerve-wracking experience. Um, but one that I think was reinforced by the result of every time I was on that stage in a scene, because of how I sort of entered the space with this point of view. I then was sort of rewarded by, I don't know, like how I was rewarded by everything seems new. Like I knew how things had gone before, but if I was sort of open to the idea of like this is a new day and a new performance. I know these words, but this is how it might be. It could be completely different. I don't know. Then it sort of put me in a headspace where things were more in the moment anyway, I think. Um, yeah, I think it helped release me when I was understudying production of Richard III, where I got to like at least run through a production as Richard III for an understudy performance, not for public, but like really. But I think I just some of those things I got to really like play with.
Mm.
Um, because I also didn't have the time to build too many patterns or preconceived notions of the role. I just sort of like had the text and was like, okay, I'll just do it. Stupid ear things keeps wanting to fall out. What is it about my right ear that moves my jaw and then it's like, bloop? Um, anyway, and I think, but most in the last 5 years, because of the pandemic and not being able to do performance as much, I think it's expressed itself more in my coaching, teaching, facilitating.
Okay.
Um, I think recognizing it has made me sort of be more like, this is what I'm thinking, so I'm going to say it. Um, Me having a reaction to someone's work and then wanting to help them is sort of like, I think it's helped me become a better coach, actor, person when I'm working with people, because I'm much more like there's this channel of ideas that I'm having while I'm watching someone. And sometimes I get the opportunity to sort of voice it. And like, and sometimes I don't care about whether it's clear or not. I just need to get it out there. And then I try to like work with them to see if they can understand what I'm saying. If they can't, great, fine, whatever. But if they do, if they can sort of like put something to that works or resonates for them, then I think we can get somewhere. But yeah, I think it's really helped me just sort of be a more unfiltered coach, teacher.
I love that. So you went to grad school, came back to New York City. Walk me through the beginnings of your professional life as an actor.
Um, Beginnings. I guess, when does one start being a professional? Uh,
Well, I mean, when you finally came back and you were like, "I'm going to do this thing. I'm not going back to school anymore." I think is
uh, I think when I landed back in New York and also still was like, okay, like don't expect too much of yourself after coming back from grad school. Like again, you're not gonna like rock into a room and get the first job you audition for. I just was like, audition for things. I was pretty staunchly against the idea of taking class ever again. Like I was like, I've had enough school. I do not need a class. I just need to be in the real world auditioning and getting to know people because I'm like, I suck at the industry side of this. And full transparency, I still do. I've never really embraced or felt great about the business of acting.
was
I don't think, uh, well, one, I don't think a lot of school sort of prepares you well for it because they're sort of outside of it. They try to mimic it or try to like, well, we're just trying to prepare you for real life. I'm like, yeah, but you're not in real life. So like sit the fuck down. Um, but like, or you're so outside the industry where the industry is operating, like you have an older idea, or you're perpetuating an industrial idea of the theater complex that's sort of either not accurate or not helpful.
mm,
Um, so there's that. But there's the things you have to like run it like your own business, and I don't think I necessarily always had the personality or the driver initiative to understand how to run my own business. I'm a drone who works part of a business. I've always been like one of many in a business, and the business gives me the sort of like procedures and things to follow. And like I think as an actor, there's like ideas that people have done that made them more successful than others. But I'm like, that's because that's Laris. Like, I am not Laris. So the things that work for Laris are not necessarily going to work for me. I can try them, but like, he's also who he is, and I am who I am. So, and the way people judge us or see us are not the same either. And so much
mm,
of what we do and the people we're auditioning for has a very subjective point of view on someone wanting to hire us for a certain job anyway. But I think marketing myself or the way I think I would have to market myself, I just never really bought into the business aspects of like, I have to create Kevin LLC.
Right.
and figure out how to market Kevin and figure out how to invest a lot of time and money in Kevin LLC as an actor, and I think that felt put up. It didn't feel genuine to me. And maybe because of what we do is so intertwined with our personality and identity. And I thought, how do I businessify myself? And I never quite, I don't think I've ever quite fully embraced that notion. I think it's sitting over here, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's probably something I probably should do. And again, there's that dangerous word should, but I'm just like, but because I think I should do it, there's a part of me that's like, so I'm not gonna.
You're
Like the
rebelling against
contrarian is
yourself.
me is like, yeah, I'm like, no, you think you should do that? That means you don't want to do it. So you can't, you've already learned that you can't really force yourself to do the thing you don't want to really do. So you'll just resent it if you did it. So, see what you actually want to do. And like, I think we sort of tailor and curate the lives we want by what we actually want to do, versus what we should do. So, uh, yeah, I just haven't really didn't really figure that out. I tried my own way, which was like, I was like, I like the relationship building. So I definitely was like, I'm going to build relationships. And so,
Hmm.
like, whether that was with casting directors, and maybe sometimes that meant taking a class with a casting director, but that was fine because I was like, look, I get to maybe work on some work, but I get to like get to know this person who has insight into the industry, who can sort of let me know their points of view on what works or what doesn't work, or maybe the things that I think are important. And they'll be like, look, that doesn't matter. Here's what's important. And, and then got to know one or two casting directors. Of course, there were always these old white guys who, of course, are no longer doing it. So that relationship building eventually like went to the wayside because there was nobody to take their place when they either like passed away or retired.
Right.
But I was always like I'm a people person and I want to like nerd out and have conversations and do that. And so there's a lot of my professional side. If I wasn't auditioning, I was trying to be a reader because even just the learning experience of being a reader and being this beaming support energy to whoever was auditioning was always fun for me. I'm like, the pressure's not on me. I can help you and be the best reader you've ever had. Yes. And that was always fun because then I was like, look, I'm in here not to get a job. I'm here to help someone else probably get a job, but I'm also like, because the pressure's not on me, I can sort of be in this room without this sort of anxiety that I get when I'm on the other side of it. And maybe go, oh, this sort of like preciousness or anxiety that I put on myself as the after auditioning. Let's see if I can sort of dismantle that a little bit and demystify it. And then, because you're right, when you're in a room as a reader for 8 hours a day for 3 days in a row, like it feels old hat. And so, like, this sort of anxiety and preciousness that you have for your 2 minutes as an actor, I was like, oh, I can kind of shed this because it's actually not that precious anymore. Like I was using my time as 2 minutes to just be in that room, and that's all I've got. It's help uh, overwhelmingly important, like or like disproportionately important. And so, being a reader, for example, professionally, was so helpful. Like not even just to understand like the way people auditioned and sort of see the weird patterns of people auditioning. You're like, oh yeah, they took the same class. They're following some like you know, rubric of what good auditioning is, right? And then sometimes how that could come across as someone, you know, tracing lines or following the dots of a good
Mm.
guide for auditioning versus like embracing it, but also like finding themselves within it. Like there's good audition technique that you can follow, but then there's like, okay, A to Z is this, but like, oh, where am I in that? And so you understood quickly because you got to see so many actors. You got to see the people that were really good at embracing themselves and their own genuine personality in the room, versus the ones who sort of left their personality and who they were outside the door and were just coming in with this very controlled, very like, I'm going to do the good things you're supposed to do. And then be surprised when no one remembers them. Not because they're bad or because they're not good enough. It just they can be so controlled because they're
Mm.
trying to like fill in the good details and I think sometimes leaving themselves out of it. So yeah, and when you saw the people who really brought themselves in, whether that worked for what the project was or not, but you could still say they brought themselves entirely into this room, like the good and the not so good. So, and that stuck with me more often than not is the people that were sort of being genuine to themselves, and I think that had a much more positive influence on auditors and people auditioning people, whether they cast them or not. I think they left an impression just by being who they were. I'm trying to think, what else did I do professionally? Started to eventually move into voiceover because I was like, I've been told for years, I was like, I should do voiceover. So I was like, well, maybe I should figure that out. Tried to do some classes to get to know more about it because I had no idea, and recorded a demo. I've done little bits of things here and there, but not nearly as successful as some of my friends who are great and wonderful and all these things, but never have quite fully broken into getting like work all the time as a voiceover artist. Um, uh, so yeah, it sort of like expanded into other sides of the industry, so to speak, that I've been curious and could see myself doing. But you know, still to some level, I'm like, oh, is there something more I should be doing? Oh, there's that word again. Well, what do you want to be doing? And so, I guess I don't know if that fully answers the question, like what I'm professionally or how I am navigating the professional landscape or not. But that's sort of how I got into it, where I'm at, what my experience has been, I guess. And
Well,
inequity. So, but I'm not SAG. So if union status conveys anything, I am union, but like, God knows I haven't done a production at least for a year. And even before that, like 4 years. So like I pay my dues.
well, we met within the context of Shakespeare. So walk me through what your relationship is with Shakespeare and some of the shows and the experiences that you've had in that realm.
Um, I think language has always been something that made sense to me, even
Mm,
since like high school. Like before I was doing a lot of theater, I understood and the power of words. I was a big book reader, I think, and really enjoyed and the importance of words and really wanted to understand words. And I don't know, at some point I think it was like other things in my life, it just made sense to me.
mm,
And so I really became hyper focused on it in like undergrad, did this really cool summer performance internship at Shakespeare and Company after I graduated college and really got to sort of enmesh myself in that place, the good and the bad there. But like really engage in that process and be around text and really find my association with it, maybe kind of like why I liked it. And I think that has really informed my points of view on Shakespeare and classical text ever since college and that sort of experience since then. Um, I think because of that, though, I also have a very high bar for what I think is good work, uh, accessible work. And I think one of the things that disappoints me often in the States is I see a lot of classical work and Shakespeare where I think there is somewhere in someone's process, whether the director or the actors, is something's not quite clicking, or they're taking a shortcut to something because they don't have the time, perhaps, or no one's sort of pushing them to make this one moment accessible because they got the one thing they wanted and they sort of like let a couple other things slide, and so that ultimately I think results in like pieces of something being good versus a whole production from top down. And then it made me go, oh, like this is actually much more rare than I give it credit for when from top down something is like a good Shakespeare production. Um, story, text, like my acceptance of the world and the production and the conceit. Um, and yeah, and then I as like so that's like sort of my grew to love Shakespeare and text, I guess, and understand the sort of the nitty gritty of it and um the rules of it, but also like how to like break the rule. Like there's understanding the form, and then there's the using because you understand the form, you then know how to break the form to your uses to some degree if it helps you. I guess if that makes sense. And then with I guess which leads me to eventually Shakespeare Forum, which is kind of how we know each other. Um, I just started going and had found this group. I'd found a friend of mine who'd been going to the group, described it to me, and I was like, that sounds crazy. Why would I put myself in a, because I was avoiding anything like a workshop or a class. I was like, no, I don't want to be in a room with actors who can all judge each other and give really toxic advice. That's not helpful and not constructive and puts me in a mindset that feels like old story, old me, things that I was like looking for validation for that I was like, I'm not going to get in a class because it's going to be far too subjective. Like, why would I do that to myself? And then finally went and it was like, oh, but this is different. Oh, okay, great, great, great. And then it took on a huge importance for me. It became like church, the experience I had. And I sort of really started to hone my own skills as like an audience feedback person. It became very important to me to like have a very clear idea of why I might say something and because of like what that response was in regards to someone's work, and I was like, I'm not just going to say something. It's going to be, I'm going to follow an impulse in my head of like, no, this is what I saw. And this is why I think it's important for you to hear it. Um, and so over the course of years, kept doing that, kept giving sort of that space to my mind and my psyche for that kind of feedback and constructive criticism, I think. And then eventually sort of enmeshed myself within that group and then started doing productions with them, maybe took a class. I can't remember if I took one or two classes or not because I was like, oh, I want to be around these people. I like being around these people and this sort of way they work, which wasn't very dogmatic or rule based or technique based. It was just like, here's in the moment what we think we could go after. Um, and then that eventually led them to reach out to me and they're like, hey, we trust you, we like you. We think you would be a really important voice to have in this room as an actual facilitator and coach. And I was like, oh my God, cool. Oh, I don't know. I've never felt like I could be an authority figure. And now I was being put in a position where I was an authority figure. And that terrified me to no end. Um, but as the more I did it and the more I sort of realized like, oh, it wasn't about me. Sort of was about seeing how I could maybe help the person in front of me for 15 or 20 minutes and like lean on my own experiences and not what I thought Claire might say or not how I thought Tyler or Sybil wanted to do something. It was like, well, what is my experience as a subjective person with this person and what might resonate with them? What am I noticing? What do I care about maybe in this moment that might help them? And that was all I could sort of go after. Um, so, and then that's been a very interesting journey that I never would have imagined for myself after grad school was like being that person who said, oh, I don't think of myself as teaching Shakespeare or teaching language. I just think of myself as like another actor who can kind of be like, well, I'm just going to like reflect back to you and here's what I see and here's like some of my thoughts and ideas. And if that resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, I don't know. But all I can say is when you actor do this, this is the result it has for me. So that choice you're making there, what if we lean into that more often versus what you're doing here? Let's like accentuate the positive and the constructive and the ones that gives you the sort of like feedback results that you like as an actor and artist and like sort of recognize that versus the more like, I don't like when you do this, or I think you should do this, or this is my opinion of that. And so that's also been an adjustment as like I came from workshops and classes and schools that was like felt more corrective
Mm,
versus sort of like supportive. And supportive not being, Laris, you're great. Whatever you're doing is awesome. You're a great person. Whatever you do is fine. But like there's like tough love, there's challenging love. There's like you can be someone who can sort of like say, I can reflect back to you what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing and like and then sort of up to that person how they take it, whether they take it to a good place or a helpful place or I don't know.
how has the work benefited? How has working on Shakespeare, whether you're facilitating, coaching, doing the plays, benefited you as an actor and as a human being?
Uh, So I feel like that's easy. I was like, yeah, because it sort of held me to my own feedback. I
Mm,
started realizing that I was like, oh, well, now you're asking people to do things. You need to do the things you're asking people to do. And
mm,
so and I think it was important that I was both an actor and a teacher slash coach.
right.
And I'm sure you can probably relate to this too, maybe. I don't know. It's like you could hold yourself accountable. So you weren't just like, everything you were asking someone else to do is not something that you wouldn't already ask yourself to do or expect yourself to do. So like it became a really good reminder of like if I'm going to be asking someone to have a certain kind of level of freedom or impulsivity that I needed to also like open myself up to those things and I couldn't fall back into my own habits. And so it gave me the opportunity like I'm not just saying these things, I'm also doing these things.
Right. I love that. So what's next for you, man?
Uh No idea. Obviously, I'm continuing to work and facilitate and coach the workshops at the Shakespeare Forum on Tuesday nights every other week, and then trying to put together a long dreamed of project. Dreamed of, that makes it sound like uh, that sort of starts to maybe try to address some of my disappointments in theater, specifically Shakespeare on stage that I've seen, whether it's on Broadway, off Broadway, or random plays that I'm like, this is consistently disappointing or bad. So is there something that I can do, at least that A, excites me, B, makes me think I can address a problem in a production, other things that I see that I don't love in other productions. Can I attack those things head on in production and go, oh, okay, it actually is that one production didn't have time or insight to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So, is there a larger problem across all of American theater that means that we won't be able to do it successfully? Or is there something in a process that I can identify with a small group of people that's like, we can hold ourselves accountable and we can maybe enter into a process with a different perspective, maybe a more singular intention amongst the whole ensemble, not just the actors, but maybe the creative side as well, or the production side, whatever you want to call it. So like those have been some ideas. I'm like, okay, is it possible for me to like take that, but then take some sort of like accessibility side of things, like what makes it so I can understand 60% of what a production's saying versus the other 40. I'm like, it's all English. I should be able to understand all of it on some level, not just because it's 400-year-old language. I'm like, it's still English. So like, what is it? What is it that most things fail at holding people accountable to in terms of being understood? So can I do these kind of things, like get people on board with a philosophy, but also still maintain a sense of accessibility? Okay, can I combine those things into one process? And okay, can I find a group of people to kind of like engage with that? Because I understand it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Like and I respect that. So I'm like, okay, it's a very certain personality type that maybe I want to be involved with this idea. And so then it became about, okay, can I find a play that I can do that with? And so like I spoke to some friends and artists and was like, here's the idea. I don't have something to work on it with yet, but here's what I want to work on. How can I do this? And so they're like, well, you should identify a play and begin from there. And then that person gave me like a list of was like identify 5 things you want to work on, regardless of why. Just like 5 Shakespeare only plays you love, like what you would do something with. And I think I listed off 5 or 6. Whether it was some of my favorites, but then I listed some weirder ones. And then they helped me sort of like hone in on the one that I eventually chose in this case, which is I've sort of been working on Henry VI, which will be like parts 1, 2, and 3, as sort of a field, or what's the metaphor I want here? It's sort of like a mine ready for ripe for mining gold or something that I can work on. It gets my mind all of a sudden thinking creatively and go, oh, here's a cool problem I want to try to figure out with other people.
Mm.
Um, and so that's something that I'm trying to sort of like build for myself without any kind of like time urgency, expiration, the idea of, oh, you should have something put together by November. Deadlines apparently don't work for me because if I think I should have something by November, what am I going to do? I'm going to avoid it until November. So that doesn't work for me.
Right.
So if I'm like, great, if I just go, this is what I want to do. This is what we're doing right now. This is very in the moment. This is what it is. I'm not going to try to worry about how the next 6 months work. I'm not going to try to go, I must produce a thing in spring, and work backwards. And I was like, if one of my complaints about what we do or what any production might be, if a factor and a variable that sort of inevitably, cuts productions or companies off at the knees is time. I'm like, okay, well, let's get rid of time. If
Mm.
getting something done in a certain amount of time is not as important or urgent, then what can you do? Well, then you start to worry less about, great, we can't do it this month. Maybe we'll get together next month. Then it becomes less about trying to gear yourself for a product, which is a really hard thing to drill out of actors or people in the profession when you're trying to just have conversations or explorations or workshops that happen in that moment,
Mhm.
because everyone starts to think, okay, how can I sort of formalize this and create something and then put it up here? And
Right.
I was like, just be here right now in this really nerdy space that we've created in this 2 hours where we got to talk about theater and Shakespeare, and it may not happen again. Or it might happen three other times. Or maybe we produce something in 3 years. I don't know. I don't want to worry about that. I just want to be in this room right now and not build the next 6 blocks in this journey. I'm letting each block sort of define what the next block wants to be. So if I, for example, did a 2 hour workshop, as I have done recently, of Henry VI Part One, and had some lovely actors, yourself included, in the room to read some of it, and I was like, this is fun, and I never wanted to do it again, I'd be like, great, I figured that out. I do want to do it again, and do I continue where I was left at, or do I pivot and go somewhere else? It could be anything. Like, and so that's, I'm not beholden to any kind of like outline I've created for myself in terms of having to do a thing. And that is nerve wracking because the old habits and the old ideas about you should be doing this thing, or why aren't you working more on Henry VI, or why aren't you giving yourself more headspace? And I think going back to this idea of I've allowing for grace. I'm allowing that there's going to be days where I am too tired or too preoccupied with life, job, friends, love life to be able to give Henry VI any space that week. And then there'll be some weeks where I'll give Henry lots of space. And that was great. And it wanted to be there for that. So I think that's the only thing creatively other than working with Forum that I'm doing right now. And then whatever else happens, like I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. Who knows? And if we're seeing theater as much or as little as I can sometimes, like, I don't see it every week. I could go 3 months and see nothing, and then all of a sudden I'll have a week where I see four things. Like I go in spurts.
And you mentioned accessibility. Can you define what that is really quickly?
Uh, Accessibility.
Yeah, you said what's accessible when you were talking about
Oh,
the
oh, oh,
actual
oh,
work.
oh, well, like, I say accessibility in regards to the text. So how can I define this better? Actors that really understand what they're saying and why they're saying it
Mm.
is one way to put it. So I think people tend to not they skip some steps, they skip some diligent work that I think they probably could do to help them understand what they're saying better. And it's deceiving. So I said it's all English, we should all understand it. And I think what happens is people go, it's English, I know what this word means, and so they don't. They're not doing the work to understand its context within sort of like a thought or an idea or the way that a character is using it. And so sometimes they think, oh, I know what this means, but they don't really know what it means, or they don't know it in the means of what they're saying, or the context of what they're saying. And so they get a sense of what they're saying. And so then one way to describe it is like, I sometimes think what we get for when we're not understanding what an actor is saying on stage and any kind of like classical text or heightened language is like we hear words, but we don't quite comprehend it. But we do get a sense of like, okay, I can give you like a generic story, but I think he's like angry, sad, depressed, excited, charming, confident, like these things. But I don't know why he's doing these things, but I can sort of build a story and fill in certain gaps. Versus the times where you like understand completely what they're saying, why they're saying it, what they're going after. And I think some of that has to do with people who like have a sense of what they're saying versus know exactly why they're saying it. They're saying the word honor, they're not saying something else. So then the idea that like you have to marry the word and the meaning in your thought versus people who are like, well, what I'm really saying is fuck off, but I'm saying these words. I'm like, well, you're not saying fuck off. You're saying, this word. So like it's trying to like eliminate this sort of like duality. I think that sometimes happens in people's understanding of text that thinks that they just have to go this far, and as long as they have a sense of it and they understand an idea of it, that they can just act the idea and that someone
Mm.
out here will get it. And I actually think we have to be much more in alignment with the words and our meaning and what those meanings and those words are to us and our associations with those words and what it means. And you know it when someone's doing it, because especially when it happens in the production, when you're like, I understand Hal, but I do not understand Harry. And I was like, what is Hal doing that Harry's not? Because they're both in verse, you know? So I guess going back to accessibility is really trying to like make sure everyone's doing the work and holding everyone accountable all the time to the text, whether it's the most famous speech in the world or it's the in-between scene that has like 10 lines, that they know exactly why they're saying those 10 lines too. And so from top to bottom, that kind of accessibility, both for the actor in the text, but also the audience in the text, because I think if I am of the opinion that if an audience doesn't necessarily understand it, it's not their fault.
Mm.
That maybe we are not doing enough as a production to make sure that to give them the greatest opportunity. I can't make them understand it. That would be sort of like against my foundation principles of what I think how theater should work in terms of like, I can't make you do anything. I can't make you leave the theater crying or laughing. I can't make you have a reaction. I can invite opportunity and create a higher law of average for that possibility, maybe for some level, but like I can't actually make you feel a thing or do a thing. And so, but if we can really do the diligent work of making sure the actors, that's the control we have, of really making sure they're absolutely clear on why they're saying a thing and what they're saying it for, and the story that they're the larger narrative and story they're a part of, I think we would create the greatest opportunity for an audience to meet us halfway and be like, oh, right, okay, and then really pull them in. I've talked with other friends about this bridge concept of what we do between stage and the audience is we're sort of like together, we're sort of building a bridge and we're kind of meeting in the middle. You
Mm.
know what I mean? And I think really good bridges are formed each night where the audience is doing their part and then we're doing our part and we get here and then it's complete and then you get like it's things, right? And people can kind of go back and forth across that bridge. But then sometimes you get productions who are trying to do all the work for the audience and build the entire bridge, and you get these people who are just sitting back and like you wonder why they're not having any kind of emotional catharsis or whatever when they're being sort of like berated or they're being like having some morality being driven down their throats. Like, we're not giving the audience enough credit, right?
Right.
So as a theater maker, I come into a space and you're coming into my space or our space together. And we're doing something together. I'm not doing all the work for you. I don't want to do all the work for you. Like, you're gonna have to meet me halfway here a little bit. Like, I'm doing my half of the thing here, and you should do your half. So part of me wants to make sure that we build our half of that bridge in this metaphor to invite possibility of an audience wanting to build their side of this bridge so that we can have those moments where we meet. Um, and obviously there can be more fleshed out with that metaphor, but that's my perspective and my idea on sort of like theater making, and I'm not even sure where this started from.
Well, Kevin, on that note, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. You have
Great, I
tons of
talked
great
way too much.
experience. No, 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 no. It was great. You've given so many gems. This is a pleasure. I don't know when that's going to happen for you. I hope it happens soon, the production, and we'll be sure to announce it when it does finally come out. We're not going to put any due dates on it because we know how that's going to work out.
There's no due dates.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, you have a wonderful day, man. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Laris. Have a good one.
Ciao.